today we have a really special panel. We have Gen, who has been in CVC, in the same CVC, Sony Innovation Ventures, for a long time. We have Stefan, who, to use Catherine's term, has been a repeat offender, multiple CVCs and head of CVCs, a lot of experience, even a PhD in corporate venturing. And we're going to use his key learnings as articulations for today's panel. And myself, who has been doing corporate venturing for about 5 years now. So I think we are going to discuss about KPIs and how we should think about KPIs through the maturity phase of a CVC, from when you start to when you are evolving and getting really mature, and clearly across the full spectrum. So we have a slide that we had prepared. I don't know if we can show it, maybe? No? Okay, maybe not. So we'll just have to do from memory, right?
What we have is in common Japanese corporates.
Exactly. So clearly there is always these discussions about the full spectrum, from strategics to financial. And maybe we'll start with Stefan. If you don't mind sharing these 4 pillars that are from your research, and then we will articulate. Ooh, we have it.
That's great.
But I think it's good for you, Stefan, to start sharing about this research you did and your findings.
Okay, my understanding is we talk about the left 4 pillars mainly. So to make it short, the right pillars are about the financial performance. Every corporate decides himself what the performance should be, what is possible, 1x, 1.5x, 2x, 3x, whatever, right? IRRs. So I think this is clear, but at the end of the day, it's all about being a good investor, right? And I think what makes a good investor is not only the performance, but it's how they help and perform on board seats, board observer seats, and help the startups to replicate their business plan, right? Execute their business plan. So I think this is the right-hand side, and I think there's a lot pros and cons how to do that. But I think what we wanted to discuss today is more what are the 4 pillars, and this is what I described, the 4 pillars of strategic venturing, difficult to measure, difficult to define, but let me try to explain what at least we understand as a strategic investor about these. What is not a discussion is that all of these pillars are important, right? Nicolas, you said if this is the roof of the corporate strategy, yep, right, and 1 pillar is missing, you have a problem. Yep. So at least the right-hand side says for corporates, don't burn money, bring back some revenues. But in relative, the bigger the bigger the corporate is, the less important is the size of revenues in case of multiples of investment that you do, right? So in relative to your shareholder, it's nice. They say thank you very much, but the shareholder will not notice. So left-hand side. So collaboration to start with. What does collaboration mean? I think you call it different. We have a corporate venture office in Japan, 20 people, not only Japan, France, Silicon Valley, who facilitate working between startups and business units, startups and R&D, and other entities in the organization. And I think there's some KPIs how to measure successful collaboration. One which is really measurable is what kind of sales or revenues are generated between startups and business units at the end of the day. In R&D, you would call that probably new product vitality index, right? How many new products are evolving over years. In venture capital, you could have real returns in case of POCs, applications that you jointly collaborate with. So some KPIs about that. The second one is strategy. So I think from at least from our perspective, wherever you invest, you need to have a strategy first, and then think about budget needs for, within corporate and others. But what we do on this side, we somehow are the sparring partner in case of strategic discussions for the business units. We do deep dives in relevant different areas of our sectors, right? Industrial, mobility, health, green, IT. And we share these deep dives and landscaping with the corporation. We even become sparring partner. To be able to do that, we need to develop some kind of thought leadership, right? We need to have some experts in the small team of 15 people around the world who are experts in some relevant areas. There are some KPIs how you can measure that, how many collaboration and how many discussions going on, or how many communications going on between the business units and the startups and yourself about strategic guidance, is about strategic even trends, benchmarking in these relevant sectors. And there are some KPIs that you can imagine, and maybe we talk about that later. So collaboration and strategy are the most important. And if you see some numbers below, this is just an estimate of what the feeling is, having had multiple over 20 years discussions. And it's changed over time. As I think venture capital 10 years ago was more the finance-oriented performance need. Today it has changed somewhat so that the size of these pillars are relative to their importance. Culture and entrepreneurship is not unimportant as well. If you imagine a Japanese company like Hitachi, well, we are struggling to be more global, more Western-oriented, looking in Europe, looking in America for startups. It's a question of culture, to be open, to be quicker, decision-making, taking more risk, starting businesses from inside out. It's a question of culture. In R&D, you would call it not invented here, right? You have the same in corporate venture capital. And then there's entrepreneurship. And of course, you know, well, it's not a secret. There are not too many real entrepreneurs inside of big corporations, right? Whether it's the middle management or whoever, but how to help them, how to give them tools, how to create a business plan, how to start a business from inside out. This is something that we try with specific training, doing due diligences, doing business plan development with some selected future executives, and try to have this kind of conversation or even training. Or coaching, right? Well, to our limits, right? It's a huge effort, but they do once in a while dedicated projects like a deep dive, like a specific startup and business opportunity that they look into, but they learn while doing that jointly with us. So that's a very good example. Again, very difficult to measure, right? So for example, we have 5 of these trainings a year, which is somewhat time consuming, but the feedback is very good, what we receive. And we are a small team. Well, Hitachi has more than 400,000 employees, 15 people getting some significance in the organization because we are working very different, right? And we are working not out of Japan, we are working out of Munich, Boston, Silicon Valley, maybe in the future India. Maybe we join your office in India. Yep. But I think this is a big challenge. So I think just having said that, the graphic shows what is really important, though difficult to measure. And of course, it makes life easier if you have to present that to your CEO, CSO, to strategy officer or CFO. They want to understand what do we get. So at least the one topic which is easy to measure in collaboration is the revenues that you might consider. And my previous job in 3M, just when I left, I was told by the ex-CFO, and I'm still good friends with him, saying, Stefan, you and your team, you generated something like 3 billion revenue over time for 3M, right? So something similar would be nice without coming to a specific number, right? But actually, this is what counts for the executives and for the organization. So maybe that's one measurable thing.
I'm sure you want to do more than 3 billion, right? For Hitachi
Never
Ventures.
overpromise.
Ah.
Let's see.
So yes, I do like this representation of a roof with pillars, because if you miss one pillar, you already have a shaky house. And if you miss maybe two, then you have a broken house. So maybe again, which of these pillars did you find the most difficult over time? So it didn't
Strategy.
Yeah?
Strategy, I don't know, but I've been working in American companies, European companies. In Japan, I did not find too much very clear strategies how to develop a business, right, to next level. They are very much engaged. I don't know, Jen, you can comment on that, but they are very much engaged with keeping up with revenues, driving price, driving some kind of sales. But the more midterm to long-term view, and this is where you need a strategy, is sometimes even not existing. So we try to help to set these strategies up, or to challenge them, or to come up to some definition. But I think it's a key, and I think it's something everyone should start with. This is why we do these deep dives in relevant landscaping and areas where we think there's an opportunity and where to go, right? And I think this is a difficult job. This is the core of open innovation, right?
Yep. Where to go and where not to go.
Exactly.
Again, do you want to add more?
Well, as you can see, Stefan is ready to write a book about open innovation. And Nicolas and I have already negotiated copyright revenue from his book.
Yes.
So I think, it's something that's, so we continue to will help you do that. But so I think, and, discussion about Sony, thanks much. And we've been actively investing, but we're kind of a little bit different because, so we have 3 core businesses which are headquartered in the US. Sony Music, Sony Pictures, and PlayStation is actually headquartered in San Mateo. I remember going to our San Mateo office and saying, I'm from headquarters, and the people on the front counter tell me, no, we are the headquarters. so we're kind of a little bit different there. But Stefan was so elegant in laying out all the details, but I think I could use this chart in a bit of a different way. So I think you also talk about over time. So I was in one of the teaching sessions arranged by GCV and was asked, what would you do differently if I were to restart to do the CVC from scratch? And so now I started my organization totally from scratch, but using this chart, I can say that in the beginning, when we were making the first or the second or the third investment, I was keen to stay very strategic. I work with my top executives, talk about robot technology, what could be interesting from a strategic point of view. And because that was a process that was important, because to really engage the top executives and get their support, and so that they felt like this was something they wanted. But I quickly recognized that if I continue that route, my returns are going to go minus. And so I quickly shifted to the right-hand side, more of the financing, focus on the financing. As I go into the 7th or the 8th or the 9th deal. And then I really focused on the financial returns. I would do rigorous financial analysis and really put more energy, put more power in the power of my investing team. So the first 3 deals I was doing really top down. on the seventh, eighth, and the ninth deal, I sort of totally changed it to a bottom-up structure, where all the investors would meet many startups, come up with ideas, and then they choose the best ideas and then bubble it up to the investment committee. Now that I feel I've built a pretty strong investment team, now it's becoming much more important to focus again on the left-hand side and really work with the with the mothership, because the collaborations and their view of each of the industries, their know-how, all that's all very important to make more smarter decisions in the investment process.
Yep.
So another way to use the chart, but
Yeah.
I thought it was something that I could comment.
In a way, you could see it as building proof points. Initially, you make proof points with the business group to see that you really understand the value of strategy and collaboration. And then you go to the financial to build proof points with VCs and entrepreneurs and financial returns. And once you have done the full spectrum of proof points, then you can actually go back to the mission. Is that a good way to summarize?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we're all dealing with this, but in this business called CVC, building a reputation among a very vast constituents is really critical and so important. Because like I go back to the days when I was running mergers and acquisitions, my KPI is to do the deal, close the deal.
Yeah.
And then open a very expensive champagne after you close the deal. When I was running investor relations, my job was to keep the investor community happy, and and the reporting be correct.
Yep.
This job is somewhat similar to the investor relationship job in that I need to build a reputation among a big group, but the big group is quite big. So you need to build a reputation within your big company. I have 120,000 employees in Sony. And then not just the CEO level, but more of the many core key business people. I have to build a reputation within the startup community. I have to build a reputation with the VCs and my colleagues in the CVC areas. So it means that you can't do it with one person. It needs to be a real team effort. And so really, so it just turned, so you can't really have all the investors really going out and feel ownership if you're really working top down. It's got to be a bottom-up process.
Yep.
And that they feel ownership, they feel proud about, they feel good about what they're doing. They go out to the field, and each and every encounter they have is really building the reputation. So that's, I think that's what's interesting. That's what's so interesting about this job, I think.
And I think it's back to this pillar representation, which is if you ignore some pillars, something is going to break because you have all these constituents. And so I want to double click on you again about this back and forth. Did you change your KPIs as a consequence of realizing you needed to first be very strategic, engage with business group, but then start to be smarter about which investment that could return good financials, and then back to strategic? Or how did you think about changing your KPIs over time?
Well, so changing KPIs wasn't really that intentional. But when I started, there was these executives who signed off on making, there was 3 pieces of paper which says, you guys make a CVC. But to really keep them happy so that they won't back off, I really need to engage them. But when you start doing top-down deals, and no negatives for the executives, but when a very senior person comes in and says, I like this deal, well, who's going to do due diligence? Who can do due diligence and says, no, you're totally wrong? That becomes very hard. So, from midway, I realized that we needed to really change to a bottom-up process, or we're going to die.
Yep.
I've told my CFO that if the returns go negative, you can chop me off anytime. So I felt that timing was getting closer. But so, especially in this type of an environment, really getting the power of the mothership to really help the startups is immensely important, I think.
And just to add to Jen, I think the setup of the venture arm is really key to success, right? So about the investment committee, for example, who is the investment committee, who is attending, what is their expectation? I think this is a big topic, and we are all very similar, but a little different in some extent. So we have our own investment committee, but we carefully listen to the strategic guidance that we get from the organization. What is the key topics for the future, generative AI, supply chain planning, and so on. And of course, we don't look into what we like, right? And what does not fit to Hitachi. But so this is what we do. But we know we need to be very quick in this high competitive market. Quick decision making, right? Quick due diligence, and then go for it. If you would talk to every stakeholder in the organization, does he like this deal, yes or no? You would end up in a never-ending, not investing story and miss out a lot of opportunities. The second topic that you mentioned is the reputation, and I think to have a good reputation within your organization, that's really important, right? But it depends on whom do you speak to, right? And there's a lot of history in corporate venture capital when it was like, when I started in 3M, if you don't kill more than 50% of your companies, or if they don't die, you're doing good job, right? That was 15 years ago, right? So now this has changed. They want to see contribution to growing their businesses, adding value to entrepreneurship, to a strategy, right? And having a sparring partner. This is what you said. I think it's perfectly right. We call it thought leadership. You need to develop experts in your investment team in specific areas, right? So we are not bankers, we are engineers, physicists, whatever, right? And try to the next level. And the last point was to build reputation, you need to communicate, right? Inside and outside. So you need to find ways how to communicate and embrace the whole of R&D, the whole of business development teams in the organization. If they don't get it, and if they are not supportive, you don't do any collaboration, right? They listen, they say, oh, nice, do what you want, thank you, we are not interested. Then it's not successful. It will never be successful, right, on this end. It may be then a good investment, you generate some revenues and some multiples, but there's no really learning from startups, no impactful growing these businesses from inside out. And it's mostly in the adjacent areas. It's not the core business where you want to integrate open innovation. It is the adjacent areas from outside in, outside innovation. This is the big difference to organic R&D, right? And by the way, when you read the PowerList interview, I start with, is CVC the new R&D? Well, this is, of course, a cynical question, but there's some truth behind, right?
There's lots of truth behind.
It's a booster of R&D at least, because it's much quicker, right, to a lot of topics, and we could talk about that for hours.
No, but Stefan, I totally agree with the thought. But so I think when you talk about KPIs, what you should not do, in my view, is that when a new topic comes out, say this is not in my field, or neglected, because that's really going to haunt you. I mean, we got metaverse, we got Web3, we got Gen AI. So each of these topics are a way to reinforce the reputation or the importance of you to the organization. And so you really need to be on top of the information. But if you're out there sourcing, meeting lots of new startups, or just having, like us, talking about what's going on in the world, I think it's in most situations we can come out on a little bit faster than many of our colleagues, let's say in the R&D department, and tell management that this is coming, you should be aware. So one of my colleagues threw in a report on this, something called NFT, years back. But that was thrown in at a really appropriate time. And then the management says, you guys are doing your job. So I thought that was quite important.
I think if we think about corporate VC, it's to help the corporations with their blind spots. So what you just described would be the sin of a CVC to have their own blind spots, because then you're not doing your job.
No, I totally agree to that. And you talked about the investment committee. We were just jokingly discussing, but it just happened that when we made our CVC, the CEO said, if everything comes to me, decisions are going to take time, so you guys decide at the junior level. But it just happened that after 7, 8 years, the people who are in the investment committee became the president, the CSO, and the CTO.
So you did a good job.
So they become very busy people. So I mean, we're really having a tough time coordinating schedules. But they want to hang on to this relationship to the CVC because they think it's a great information source.
Yeah, actually, I wasn't joking when I said you did a good job, which is you helped these people not to have blind spot on what could disrupt Sony and what should Sony embrace. And that's probably why they don't want to leave the investment committee. Would you agree with that? I mean, you've seen a few investment committees in your career.
Yes.
What is the best example you have of something that someone in the investment committee was going to miss? And thanks to the CVC and the screening and the sourcing and talking to entrepreneurs, all these weak signals put together, probably the $3 billion revenue is part of it.
Oh, there are so many stories around that. But I think, from a corporate perspective, you feel comfortable with what you know, right? And you need to be just open to adapt and accept completely new topics. We call that new frontiers, right?
Yep.
And the CTO in 3M, he said, Stefan, you are here to inspire us to think about topics that we have never thought about. But if we work with it, we find out it's really essential that we are experts in these spaces, right? And we didn't know. So it's some kind of experimenting as well, right? And if you don't have this freedom to experiment, and you can fail, right? You don't have a chance to speed up and to grow the value add for the businesses. You are not able, right? But there are many who came into my office and said, Stefan, wow, how could you, for example, if you are on the board of M&A as well, like you have been and I have been in 3M, right? There were businesses coming up and say, I want to invest in this company. I want to buy them for $1 billion, right? And half a year later, and I said, well, where's your strategy? How are you going to do that? Oh, we are working on that, right? It was rejected. Half a year later, they came and said, oh, we are happy we did not invest, right?
Yep.
Because now we know we should have experimented in this space. We would not have known how to replicate this business on a global basis. So thank you very much. You saved us $1 billion. And by the way, the company went not bankrupt, but the value increased significantly.
Yeah. So I want to shift gear and now be very concrete. And everyone probably wants to know, what is a good KPI for strategy, that second pillar? So let's start with you, Stefan, and Gen, and then I will share one of ours. What is the most meaningful KPI for strategy you are using today?
I think around strategy, you need to have a good dialogue with stakeholders in the organization, right? So first of all, you do these deep dives and understand yourself and landscape, what's happening. It's like benchmarking. It's like finding out about opportunities in this space. So, for example, we look into 1,000 startups a year, right? And some of them are, for example, in the space of industrial, right? And then we narrow down what makes sense. But during this process, the dialogue about strategy for a midterm strategy for Hitachi becomes very valuable. And then you develop this thought leadership, and you decide. And what is a measure is when the business starts to call you, what do you think about this technology? Is it valuable? Yes or no? Have you something similar? Do you know startups in this space? This is when they come to you. You become their sparring partner.
And
right?
that's a measure.
That's a measure. It's difficult to measure, right? This is why it's yellow. But I think you find some topics, even some quotes, reputation, some quotes from EVPs who say, well, right, you made me think about something new. I would never thought about that before, but now we know, makes sense. Please invest and go ahead, and please let us learn as much as possible for the business unit. Right?
Okay.
It's not a number. Right? Maybe it's a quote from an EVP or from an executive leader or stakeholder in the organization, and I think that's a good measure. Right? You jointly help for a good strategy.
Thank you. Again?
Well, Stefan is much more better than me in terms of KPIs. So I think, I guess I'm talking more about our strategy and how to manage the fund. So we're very keen that we, make clear what the areas that Sony can evaluate and what's going on in the startup market, the venture market.
Yep.
What's really, driving growth in the venture market. And we try to, put the two on top of each other and then try to map out what are the areas we can really evaluate, but also grow in. So that's why, we're doing healthcare, health tech, fintech. It's not necessarily, a big area. It is. We have some expertise, but it's not necessarily the extremely big area for Sony. But if those areas are growing quicker, and then we need to have our hands on it.
Very nice. So a measure of that could be the number of mapping you do.
Yep.
Okay. So for us, we are exploration, which means we are looking at new market, new technologies. So we do have one KPI, which is a number of engagements with startups, which could include portfolio companies, but also startups, that leads to what we call early proof points of first-to-market solution. And the reason is TDK takes typically 5 to 7 years to develop a product. And so you can't wait until it's obvious to develop the product. You will never be first to market. And so what we are trying to identify, and like you said, we use quotes directly from TDK teams saying, oh, these engagements could lead to us being first to market compared to everyone else. And when that happens, 1 point. And then we also measure that across how many countries, because TDK is global, many, many countries. We don't want all this to be just the US and Japan. So we are also counting the number of countries where this type of engagements leading to early proof points count.
In Japan, you showed a very nice slide. I like this a lot, about the traffic between business unit communication and venture arm communication.
Yes,
right?
we call it the engagement scorecard, and a checkerboard.
Yes.
And we have Gita, if you want to raise your hand. A bit higher, a bit higher. Yes, thank you. And Gita
That's a
is,
good one.
yes. And so that checkerboard is actually a really nice visual way to look at all the portfolio companies on one side and all the TDK teams, and each square which intersect between the two as a color coding. Is it a first meeting, an introduction? Is it an evaluation that is ongoing? Is it evaluation that has completed? Is it a design in, which means that either the portfolio company gets a solution into TDK solution, or TDK solution gets into the portfolio company, and then design win, which is when it actually goes and be deployed and generate revenue. And so this is a really nice way to show that, in our case, all the portfolio companies engage with at least one TDK teams, but on average 3. And each TDK teams engage with multiple portfolio companies. And what's nice about this graphic is some TDK teams have 8 engagements or more, and some has only 1. And then you have my CEO. Exactly. And then you have my CEO who says, why are you not having more engagements? And then he puts this nice pressure on it.
You're making his book thicker.
Oh, yes.
But I'm not going to give in on the copyright revenue.
No, the royalty will be thicker. It's good.
But it shows a little bit the passion of businesses to
Yes.
be involved in startup communication or startup engagement. Right? So, and I think this is a good graphic. The other one that I like is your video, let's see, checkerboard, as you call it, right?
Yep.
This is a good one because how to, in case of reputation, how to explain to 400,000, 160,000 people in the organization, why did you invest in this startup? What is the topic behind? What is the reason? What is the added value that they can bring? To do a video, and then even if it's short, it doesn't need to be highly professional, but to exchange that and give all of the audience who's interested an opportunity to look at this, that makes a lot of sense, right? The same what we are doing is jointly with R&D, we do showcase startup technologies, right? And this is some kind competitive, but if you accompany this with a nice panel in-house, right? You have a great dialogue. You have a great discussion about it.
I can see we are getting Charlie very stressed. We are running out of time.
Yeah.
So please, everyone, feel free to reach out to Gen, Stefan, and me if you have questions about KPIs, including Gita if you want to know the real work. Thank you again. Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you.